All right, all right. Welcome to Connections That Matter, the CFO edition. We are joined today by Nick Fedele, the CFO of Excite Automotive, and we are going to be talking about managing and maneuvering the uncertainty. Nick, thanks for joining us today. You did commit to me that you were going to bring a fireplace to this fireside chat, but I'll just assume that the fire is burning internally within you.
That is a complete lie. I told you I would do a fireside chat. I didn't know it was bring your own fireplace. So if you would have communicated that from the beginning, maybe we'd have a fireplace, but you left that out. So
Fair
no
point. So note to self, BYOF for the next one. Nick, so talking about small to middle market businesses, according to Forbes, some of the most important things to operating a small to middle market business is attracting talent, guarding against onerous government regulations. The minimum wage fight obviously is a very big one right now, especially with Excite and being a very large hourly workforce. And then the need for more training, development, and engagement. And then obviously the types of small business challenges post-COVID, right? So a lot of those were pre-COVID. Now post-COVID is cash flow, right? Access to capital, balancing and running a business and a household. So you as an individual, how you are impacted by this. Employees are facing difficult economic circumstances. And then of course, lastly, you and I use each other as venting cushions sometimes, remaining optimistic and resilient. So tell me a little bit about when you hear these challenges, and obviously CFO, chief.
Yeah, chief Freudian slip, right?
Chief Financial Officer, or as our VP of Finance would say, Chief Financial Officer. Do some of those themes that you hear, does that resonate with you? And do you feel that at Excite you guys are experiencing some of the same?
Yeah, so we definitely struggle, or at least resonate with, a lot of the stuff that you were talking about. We're a distributed workforce. We're about 400 employees or so, 31, 32 states, depending on, kind of the month and where we're at. We're continuously kind of, expanding. So we do have a lot of, the challenges that you talked about. Pre-COVID, it was 400 employees, 350 or so are, a distributed workforce. They're they're working remote. They, deal with some of the challenges that a lot of businesses don't deal with in, they don't necessarily see their manager all the time. There's, employees who, because they're out working on a car dealership, at a car dealership on a lot, they don't have coworkers that, they see. There's stories that have been told, of employees who have been at the company for 3, 4, 5 years and have actually only met one other person. In a company that's 400 people, that's really, really unusual. So we do deal with a lot of the challenges of how do you attract, how do you retain, talent for an hourly workforce. The jobs can be hard. So it is, we definitely deal with that. We dealt with it a lot pre-COVID. I think it's a little bit different now because there's a little bit of slack, I'll say, built into the employment market now, where there's not as many jobs for people in the service industry for people to leave, a business that we're considered essential in most states. So we've got a little bit of slack to say, it's a little bit harder for people to leave now. There's a little bit less options to leave. But I do think that once this thing dies down, it'll be a post-COVID thing that we've got to deal with as well. Hopefully for us, we can, start to figure out some of the levers to pull now while we've got some runway and some slack built into the market where we can start to proactively address those things and come out even better post COVID. The war for talent, I think, will forever be a battle that we'll have to fight throughout the organization, top to bottom.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to come back to that because I'm curious. There's something that you said about it's a little bit tougher for people to leave right now. So downstream, when you're thinking about engagement, and then overall your role as, I see the CFO as sort of you've heard me say like wartime consigliere, right? Like you know the
Yep.
numbers, you know the data, you're in the fight on a daily, you're on the front lines almost more than any other C-level executive in an organization. So I do want to come back to how that level of engagement impacts you personally, if the market starts to change. So I'm going to go back to your role in sort of maneuvering the uncertainty, staying nimble, being willing to change and pivot. And you and I have spent enough time together that I know where your heart lies around the growth of Excite. Tell me a little bit more about why it's important to continue to acquire other businesses to strengthen your brand. And before you go on to that, especially, I know your belief in outsourcing. Obviously, you partner with us, and you
Yeah.
also ran your own outsourcing firm way back when. So tell me about the being in acquisition mode and how important that is to the growth of your organization and staying relevant.
For sure. So we're in an industry that is fairly fragmented. We're the second largest provider in the country, and we've got a ton of competitors that are, most of them are really regionally focused. It's a small mom and pop. They're in one locality, one market, one metropolitan area. So our acquisition strategy has been, we're going to go into some of these markets where we either have somewhat of a presence already, or we want to have an even larger presence, or have an initial presence just to begin with. And one of the ways to do that is to go in and to talk to the owners of these businesses who are doing the same thing that we're doing. They've got the same, for the most part, some of the same core technology that we have to deliver the service. And they don't have the operations experience that we have. They don't have the scalability that we have. So for us, acquisition mode is going in and consolidating, some of these more fragmented metropolitan areas. It's helping us grow. We're bringing in people who, we talked about the war for talent.
Mm-hmm.
There's a significant training element that we put into, people in this industry need to understand a certain level of what needs to be done. They need to understand software that works a certain way. So these acquisitions are not just buying customers, but they're also acquiring really good employees, talented people who know what they're doing. They've been in the business. They know how to shoot vehicles. And yeah, we'll run them through our training program. We've got a training program that's developed for reps, and we've got significant support. So it's probably at a little bit of a higher level, but there's at least this base familiarity of what the job is, how to work with a dealer, what the fundamentals are. And
Mm-hmm.
in the hiring scape that we're in, where we're forever trying to find the right talent, that's a huge win for us to be able to go in and buy a company and know that we just acquired 40 or 50 stores, and we've got employees that for the most part they're all really good. They're all have a base level of understanding, and we can just polish them up and and really help to elevate them, as opposed to having to start from scratch, going into a market, building out an infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. So that's
Yeah,
really
for
been
sure.
yeah.
No, and I love that. And that's so you're doing, I mean, there's the process integration, but then there's actually the culture integration. So I want to go back to the war for talent pre-COVID and the war for talent post-COVID is very similar still. So as the CFO of Excite, you have finance, accounting, and HR all rolling up to you. In some organizations, HR sits with the CEO or the COO. It doesn't always roll up to the CFO, but I know in connecting with you how critical talent engagement, and taking care of your people is to you. So would you say that the greatest challenge you're facing as the CFO is around people, or is your biggest challenge more, I guess, financial? Is it, obviously it's the norm, right? It's the cash flow and things
Yeah.
like that, more people who are engaged in the business. But is it more of a people challenge for you right now, or is it the typical CFO challenges?
I think I would say COVID, if you're not talking about, the economic impacts of COVID itself, the shutdowns, the lack of demand, the lack of demand in the market, those things aside, I think it's always going to be talent. If you look down our P&L, by far, by an order of, magnitude, the largest cost that we have is people. We're a people-driven business. We're a service business. We're a distributed labor business. At our core, we are a people operation. So that is always going to be, the biggest place that we spend money. It's the biggest financial challenge that we have, and it's the biggest challenge to keeping, a successful business running, growing, servicing customers, doing the right thing, innovating. I think people will forever be, our biggest challenge, but also our biggest, success. Where we will forever live and die by the people that we're able to, to hire and keep around, hopefully for a long time.
What I respect the shit out of that. Like, I think our values are pretty aligned,
Yeah.
besides the fact that we're, dog parents and other things. But um,
Yep.
what is something with that, I mean, you've been a CFO, but you are still a young CFO, right?
Yeah.
So when people think of CFO, they think of like older people that have been around forever. All they care about is money.
Right.
But the more time I spent with CFOs, especially one like you, it usually always does come back to people challenges and
For sure.
fundamental organizational challenges. It's never like, oh, we're so, obviously you're concerned around baseline and numbers and things like that, but it always comes back to people. So what's one lesson another CFO could learn from you? Like, you've been around enough CFOs to say, like, here's your blind spot. What is it? What would you say it is?
I would say there's one, and this is gonna talk to our generation, I think, a little bit, but there's this one meme that I've seen a million times that talks about, and you're laughing because you probably know the one that I'm talking about, right? Where it's like, the CFO asks, what happens if we invest in this person and they decide to leave? And then the response is, what happens if we don't invest in this person and they decide to stay? Right? And that to me is like, it sounds so it sounds so like cliche and goofy or whatever, but it's the truth. I mean, we will forever live and die by our people, and happy people make happy customers. Happy customers stick around. They pay their bills. They buy more stuff. They tell their friends. It, I don't mean to oversell, that aspect of it, but it is. I mean, we can forever try and find ways to cut costs and do things, but you're always going to be chasing, cutting pay, cutting benefits, doing those types of things. You're going to make people upset. They're not going to show up at the dealership. They'll show up 10 minutes late. They'll put in an 80% effort. A dealer's going to get pissed. They'll cancel. They'll move to a different dealership, and they won't hire you to replace their provider. So at the core, I think, making sure that we're doing right by our people, it really is, in my mind, that is my biggest focus. It's the biggest thing that I think about on a daily basis. If we can keep people around, if we can keep people happy, they'll make customers happy, and the rest of the stuff is, we'll figure that out. We'll make the numbers work and all that. And it'll all start to, it'll all fall into place. But that to me is the core, in a 400 person company like ours.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think there are a lot of times where people are always looking at the bottom line, and I'm like, your biggest asset and your biggest liability is people. 100% agree with you. And our leadership team learned last week, there's this line that this coach shared with us, that behavior doesn't change until you're present to the cost. So if you have an engagement issue, a culture issue, a training issue, to your point, there is always a cost associated with
Oh
that.
yeah.
So make the investment in your people, and the profit and all of that stuff will come naturally. If you
For
are
sure.
aligned with your why, you're taking care of your people, and their why is aligned with the purpose of the organization.
Yeah. So we have this conversation quite often, and I know you hear different numbers thrown out throughout industries, what turnover costs. Every time you turn an employee, it costs, I mean, pick a number, right? There's a million statistics out there, but it really, it is so true. I think when you have the opportunity to try and keep an employee who, is high performing, all of the things that you would hope for an employee to be, and maybe there's a tiny comp issue, a couple of bucks or something like that. The cost to replace all of that, and the cost on the downside, is, if you can at all afford it, I mean, it is it is so much easier to keep employees around and invest in your employees than it is to just run, a chop shop that's turning employees just because, you can get somebody for $10 an hour as opposed to 10.50. You know, that's a hard business to run. I don't want to be a part of a business like that. That's a huge, huge, huge challenge. So I agree with you.
Yeah. And I think, the question that I have for you is, I mean, I know you well enough as a person, you're a husband, you're a father. I'm thinking about this, coming back to our topic of engagement, right? Employees right now employees in any industry are facing extreme economic circumstances, right? And
Yeah.
you and I have talked about in the past, like how important it is for you to take care of you and yours, and which is, there's no guilt in that for anybody, right? So people are bringing that baggage to work, and we have to be cognizant of that. So thinking about engagement, you as a leader in your business, taking the CFO hat off and just being Nick, how are you exercising empathy with these challenges that your team is facing, whether they be direct
Yeah.
reports or indirect reports? And as a business leader and Nick, what are you doing to understand how your people are feeling and why?
Yeah. So I think I would say, I don't know if it's fair to say that it just kind of came naturally or it comes naturally, but I can tell you when we started down this path in, I guess it was probably mid-March, where we were looking at, I'm up here in the Northeast. It got really bad out here really quick. We were, New York was shutting down, New Jersey was shutting down, Connecticut was shutting down, and we as a leadership team had to sit here and make decisions and say, okay, PPP is not a thing yet, right? It's kind of this rumored thing that may happen, but it's not fully baked. It's not here. We certainly don't have any money. What are we going to do? We've got a business that has 400 employees, and we've got to make sure that it's still here after whatever this thing turns out to be. We've got to make sure that this business is still here at the end for as many people as humanly possible. So we've got tough decisions to make. What are we going to do? And Phil, who's our CEO, and myself, we said right from the beginning, the two of us will be involved in every conversation that involves laying off an employee. Period. Full stop. We need to, I want to know, I'm going to be the one to lose sleep over, somebody's going to have to go on unemployment because it's just not feasible for us to keep them around. I think making that decision, and if you can put yourself in the perspective where you think about yourself, hey, if I got this phone call, if I was on the other side, of this phone call being the one to be told, we're going to have to lay you off. If you can put yourself on that side and think about how that call feels, knowing that you've got a mortgage to pay, you've got car payments, you've got to feed a family, you've got to put kids in daycare. Like, if you can put yourself it sounds cliche, but if you can put yourself in the other people's shoes, you really quickly start to figure out, what other people are feeling, and you're not going to feel it yourself at that moment in time. But I think a good person can understand and empathize with what that means. And I think it starts to impact your decision making, and you don't make, decisions and you're not glib about things, right? Like you put it in
Right.
perspective, you put it in a box, and you say, hey, these are serious conversations. We're talking about people's livelihoods here. We're talking about people's families. On the flip side, we're also talking about people's health, right? And
Mm.
how do we keep people safe? This is a weird, weird, weird time to be in, because in most economic, downturns, you're not riding a line of how do I keep people safe and keep them going to work, and also, keep them employed, right? It's like you don't have to worry about that. We're riding this really weird line of I've got to keeping people at work also means they may not be, 100% safe, but
Right.
laying them off also means they don't have a job, they don't have an income, they're going to be relying on unemployment. So it was and still is, to a certain extent, a very, very, very challenging time. But I think you just find a way to get through it and kind of put yourself in that perspective, and you just be, as sober as you can in your decision making, and just be empathetic. I think that's the biggest thing is, it's easy to kind of sit in this position and just, pontificate and all that kind of stuff. But I think you have to be empathetic and try and, understand where people are coming from.
Amen. No argument for me on that. We talk about empathy all the time in our
Yeah.
organization. Put yourself in that person's shoes for just 2 minutes, right? And what
Yep.
would you want if you were on the other side? I'm going to wrap us with this, and I'm curious because all of this is new, right? So I hate to keep making COVID a topic, but it's real and it's
Yeah.
alive. And now that it's not the second wave, it's still a surge of the first wave. You brought up PPP loans and how you guys ran that process. As a CFO in your organization, how did you feel like that process ran for you guys as an organization? Are you comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah. Yeah, so we made a decision very early on, that we were going to follow the spirit of the way that this program was designed. And there's no shortage of stories of, people talking about stories being told of people that took PPP money. You got a guy that went and bought a jet. You got another guy that went and bought a house, and like the design of this plan from the beginning was to keep people off of unemployment, right? And it was to keep people on payrolls and keep people engaged in their job and connected to their company, even if they couldn't be 100% efficient or they weren't, fully employed, right? And we, from day one, made the decision that we were going to live to the spirit of this program to the best of our ability. And, it was I think we hit the nail right on the head. I don't want to, I don't mean to pat ourselves on the back or, take a
You
victory lap,
should.
right? But, we really did. We lived to that. We spent all of the money on payroll costs. We kept everybody that we needed to employed. We just, we did it the way that it was supposed to be done, and that was a decision that we made as an executive team and as an ownership group right from the jump. That this was going to be the way that it was going to be done. No ifs, ands, or buts. We're no monkeying around. We're going to do it the right way. So I actually am very, very proud of what we did. And I'll talk about it all day long, and I'll scream it from the rooftops because I think it, in a period of time where shit hit the fan, right? And it was
Mhm.
wild. And it would have been very easy to just say, lay everybody off. We've got this big, slug of cash and we'll just figure it out at some point. We made the tough decisions and said, no, we're going to live by the spirit of this plan and we're going to do what the government gave us this money for a reason, and we're going to live by that, and we're going to continue to just operate in the spirit of the reason that we were given the money. So I'm
Well,
proud of
kudos
us for
to
that.
you. Well, kudos to you. And when we wrap this, we'll throw up your Twitter handle and your LinkedIn handle. And if there's other CFOs who would love to
Yeah.
talk through that with you, I'm sure you would be
Yeah.
available to.
For
Um,
absolutely.
I'm going to wrap us with one last question, more for you as a leader. As you know, I love basketball, and I already know that you think LeBron is the GOAT. You
Yeah.
know, though, that
Guilty.
MJ is the real GOAT. So
Not true, but okay.
we'll meet in the middle on another person. I know that you were a Kobe fan. What is one Kobe leadership fundamental that you believe you carry with you every day?
Um, Kobe was a guy that, right, wrong, or indifferent, just never stopped. The man was always on. He always worked. He was always learning. You always heard stories of him in the gym, shooting free throws, working out late when the lights are off. Um, it, that to me is that is what a leader does. A leader is the guy who, when the lights are off and nobody's watching and the cameras are shut down, they're the one that's still in the gym, working on their craft. It's easy to be the guy who shows up when the lights are on, doesn't put in the work and takes all the credit for stuff. The guys who are true leaders, they're doing it when the lights are off and when no one's watching, and they're perfecting their craft and just forever getting better, because good is never good. There's always another level to achieve, and I think that's important. It's a great thing to take away from Kobe, I think.
Great lesson. And honestly, Nick, hopefully you won't nail me on a HIPAA violation, but I do know that you unfortunately suffered with COVID
Yeah.
for quite some time early on, and you still were showing up each and every day for your team. So I respect you for that, and I congratulate you. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. I remember what you were dealing with, and that sucks,
It was
man.
not fun. It was
It was
not
not
fun.
fun.
Yep.
We'll have to get you
Yep.
on with Cuomo for you guys to
Yeah.
share stories that's not as cool as Cuomo. But thank you so much for your time today. We're going to throw up your contact info at the end. If any other
Sounds
CFOs
good.
are struggling with PPP or forgiveness and their loans and stuff, we'll have you serve as a resource.
For sure.
Appreciate you as usual. Appreciate you sharing your story with us. And we'll wrap with that.
I appreciate it. Next time I'll bring a fireplace.
And next time, bring Frankie and Luigi with you too.
I will. I'll have them sit right here on my desk.
Cool.